Meeting. Rose, could you call the roll for us, please?
Councilmember Freeman. Here. Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Plinsky.
Here.
Councilmember Russell. And Councilmember Russell has asked to be excused.
Okay, do we have any members from the public that would like to address council this evening? Okay. Seeing none, we will jump right into our first presentation this evening. Welcome, Martha. You have an update and a presentation for us from the Clark County Arts Commission.
I do. This evening I'm here to represent the Clark County Arts Commission, which is brand new, by the way, just started the end of 2010. And because it's brand new, we have been putting the bones together and the foundation of it to make sure that we're up and running and productive by the time we kick into full gear. So tonight is part of our outreach program and coming back to the communities that we represent and telling you what the Arts Commission is all about. So we have this wonderful PowerPoint that they put together. This is, by the way, in-kind donation that you're looking at right now. All of us putting these things together as volunteers.
Oops, sorry.
Where is that? It works.
Yeah.
Yay. So the Clark County Arts Commission, we started the fall of 2010, and how this came about was a woman by the name of Laurel Whitehurst noticed that Clark County didn't have an arts commission, never has had one. We have a Washington State Arts Commission. We have some counties that have arts commissions, some cities, some regions, but Clark County never has had their own Arts Commission. So she went before the Board of Clark County Commissioners, I have to think of that, BOCC, and said, we want one. What do we need to do? And they gave us permission to start it. They let us borrow Bill Barron, the city administrator, to walk us through the process, and we got a resolution passed and started it. First thing we did was put together a mission statement, which I think you would appreciate, and we worked very hard on it. The mission statement of the Clark County Arts Commission is to stimulate participation and growth in the arts throughout Clark County by increasing access to the arts and celebrating the cultural diversity for all Clark County residents, developing partnerships that strive to promote the arts industry as a viable and significant for community and economic development, supporting outreach programs and activities in the arts as an integral part of educating the community, encouraging the community to cultivate a thriving environment of creative expression and appreciation for the arts, which is beneficial to all. Hence our mission statement. We also have a purpose, believe it or not. The purpose of the Arts Commission is to promote and support the arts in Clark County. We have an 11-member board, and the commission works hard, as you can imagine. We have 8 commissioners who represent the arts communities in Battleground, Camas, La Center, Ridgefield, Vancouver, Washougal, Woodland, and Yakult. These members were nominated by their jurisdictions, and they will serve 4-year terms. We have 3 additional members who were directly appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, and they represent unincorporated Clark County, the arts education process, and local business. These people serve 2-year terms and then subsequent 4-year terms. Our arts commissioners, and you may recognize some of these names, you may not, but I think it's important that you hear who these people are. Laurel Whitehurst, who was the original person that went before the board, she's our secretary. Amy Chase of La Center. Elizabeth Holmes, who is our chair. Linda Kluwer of Battleground. Pat LaCroix of Yakult. Melinda Leuthold of Woodland. Elizabeth Madrigal, Ridgefield, myself, Washougal, Erin Strom, she's the arts education professional, Donna Robert, she's City of Camas, and Annie Becker, Vancouver. We meet every 4th Tuesday of the month at 6:30. Originally, for the first year, we went around to every community and held a meeting. so that we could all visit our respective communities and see what our arts culture was like or what it needed, and heard from people in those areas directly. This year, we are going to be meeting on the 6th floor of the public building on 1300 Franklin in downtown Vancouver on Tuesday at 6:30. All meetings open to the public. We welcome you to attend. We've had many people come and talk to us about their excitement about us being formed. Yay. All right. So we've done a lot. We've been working very hard since 2010. We drafted and adopted bylaws and a conflict of interest policy. You can access that on the Clark County's website. They have copies of that. There's also a copy right there on the podium if you'd like to look at that. We elected our officers, formed committees. I'm on 3. It's amazing how that happens. We have the executive committee, and I'm the vice chair, by the way, so I'm on that committee by default. We have an outreach committee. I'm on that one. That's what we're doing tonight. Communications, they put together this, and also our website. Finance, education, and public art committees. And we welcome any volunteers that would like to help from the public. We held 15 commission meetings around the county, open and published to the citizens, solicited and received funds to create our website and to host our website, hosted presentation from several local artists who came to our meetings. It's fascinating to find out who's all out there, and some other arts organizations. And then we held a strategic planning day, a whole day that was facilitated by Liz Chiverny. She's a current La Center City Council person. It was a fabulous experience. We're not done yet. We have more to do on that, but it was very helpful to see what we're going to be doing for the community. Okay, seeing where I'm at. Thank goodness for an outline. Our timeline, just to give you an idea of where we're at. I think that's right. Okay. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to back up if I can. How do you back up on a slideshow? Just go up here. Okay. Because we missed one for some reason. Oops. Right there. Okay. Oh, okay. There it is. That's it. Okay. Will we get up there? If I start, no. Just read it from that. I'm not going to slide the slideshow over again. It's nice and fancy, but I want you to read this slide because it's our work plan for 2012, and it's pretty important for you to know what we're going to be doing. We're going to be putting together a really big event, at least once a year. And this year's event is pretty important. It's the Clark County Arts and Cultural Summit. It's on March 3rd. And this is a partnership between the Arts of Clark County, which I'll tell you about them in a moment, and the Clark County Arts Commission. It's going to be held in Fort Vancouver's newly renovated Artillery Building. That's a donation in kind. They're letting us use the building for free. Invitees will be artists, musicians, actors, writers, arts organization members, and anyone interested in the visual, performing, and literary arts that live or work within Clark County. Did you know there were so many different types of art? We're also inviting arts-related business owners as well as educators from the whole spectrum of arts education, primary to college, as well as arts therapists and cultural heritage volunteers and staff, and we hope to attract at least 150 people to this event. The gathering is about bringing together interested individuals, arts organizations, business leaders, and politicians to focus on how to create a voice to become more visible to each other locally and to the greater region. We're going to be building awareness of the resources and talent in Clark County, hopefully forging partnerships and collaborations within Clark County, and we are going to be exploring and recognizing our value and contribution to the region. This summit is intended to start a dialogue to create a unified voice and message to inform others in the region of our rich cultural, assets, and opportunities. So it's a big deal, all day. And it's a nominal fee. You'll get an invitation, by the way, so you'll know. And there's food. That's important to know. First part of the day will be instructions, facilitations, classes, and then the last part will be breakout sessions with dialogue amongst the people that are attending. And it should be very valuable to start that dialogue within Clark County. We've never done that before. It's brand new. Other things we're doing, finalizing a memorandum of understanding with the Arts of Clark County. Arts of Clark County is to the Clark County Arts Commission as the Parks Foundation is to the Parks Department. It is the financing arm, 501c3, that we have our donations go through them. They earmark things for the Clark County Arts Commission. We ourselves don't have any funding. We can raise money, we can get grants, but that money goes back through the Arts of Clark County. So we're doing lots of this out of the goodness of our hearts. We're going to complete our strategic planning, co-sponsor the summit, establish a policy and curate art gallery on the 6th floor in the Public Services Building. That's another project we're putting together for the local artists, which I hope someday to do something like that here in Washougal. Partner with Clark County Public Works and other entities on Earthworks Symposium. That's for 2013. I don't know if you know what an Earthworks Symposium is, but if you've never seen one, it's pretty fabulous. It has to do with working with public works and artists to design something out of a stormwater basin that looks terrific and beautiful. Develop the commission as a forum for art and cultural organizations to network, gain broader community exposure, increase outreach efforts to municipalities like yourself and arts organizations locally and regionally. Okay, you already saw the nice little arrow that scoops along with our timeline. We're going to go to the last slide. If I can get down there. That bottom slide gives you an idea of what an earthworks is. I believe that's up in Kent. And this process, this whole concept of earthworks started in the 70s, so it's not new. But I just learned about it, so I think it's wonderful.
There's a catch basin in that picture?
There is. Isn't that something? For stormwater. Looks like kind of a fun place to go, doesn't it? Got trails and bridges and growing grass. So, looking ahead, we're going to continue with our outreach to business groups and individuals to increase economic benefit. This is part of our purpose. We want to increase visibility of the commission. That's why I'm here tonight. The commission exists, and we're going to be out in the community, and you'll hear about us quite a bit now. We have a website, clarkcountyartscommission.org. Please visit it. It has lots of good information. We're going to be using it as a resource for local artists and businesses so they can collaborate. And we hope to establish strong relationships with regional and state organizations. So we are going to be all over everywhere, if we can. Any questions?
Questions from council?
I just want to say thank you. I have a friend who's a budding artist. He's been blowing glass for 12 years.
Jack.
Josh.
Oh, different person. Oh, another glass blower. Yay.
That's the one we talked about
That's
at the
good.
Saturday
Okay.
event. Has he contacted you yet?
Not yet.
Stinker. So thank you. I'm excited to see opportunity, especially for up-and-coming folks that are getting established. So it's great.
Joyce?
I think this is very exciting, and thank you, Martha.
Paul?
I'm curious, is there any relationship between the Arts Commission or the foundation and the sculptures which will go in down on Steamboat Landing?
No.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Anything else from council? Martha, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the time that you're putting in on the commission as well.
Thank you.
Good luck in your other presentations. Okay, moving to agenda bills.
Thank you, Your Honor, Council. Tonight we have a couple of PSAs that I'd like to go over. And I'm just going to pull up just a short presentation here on each of those, just to kind of give the new council members an overview of some of these sites. And we've got a map on here that we'll look at as well, and then we'll just touch briefly on the scope of work that's involved with these two professional service agreements. So this is our water system improvements, and this is a budgeted item. And we'll just go through. This is kind of a map. Actually, let me get on slideshow here. There we are. That's a little bit better. This is kind of a location map. It shows the different locations of the sections of water line that need to be replaced. And just move on. This is a typical leak that we have in our city. That you can see the corrosion there on the pipe, and there's some differing metals there. We've got some galvanized pipe running into some copper there, and if you do that, the corrosion process increases substantially. So the life of the pipe decreases. Next one, we've got a repair that we did. I believe this is over in the Addy area over there that we showed earlier, and you can see all the leak clamps. Each one of these bands on here is a leak clamp. So that's one time that the crew went out there, dug up the street, and repaired the line. So these lines are obviously have reached the end of their useful life. This is a spiral weld pipe, and I thought this was an interesting one as well. This is at 6th and I. This will be a portion that gets replaced. You can see how the, I don't know if you can really see it right here, but it's actually welded. It's a spiral weld, just like they call it, and it's the life on these pipes is not very good, and this one obviously needs to be replaced as well. So some of the things that Harper, Hoff, Peterson, Regalis will help us out with are as-built. So as-built are the plans, the drawings after you install the water main or infrastructure. They basically prepare a set of plans as it's built. So it shows the crews at a later date exactly what's in the ground. They'll help us out with some base map preparation too, and how all these improvements tie into our overall system. And then they'll design and prepare plans, and then we can get some bids together from some contractors after we come up with an engineer's estimate. And then they'll help us with some of the construction phase services as well. This portion about preparing SEPA, the environmental permitting, is optional. And if we do need to go through the full SEPA process, they may help us out with that. Otherwise, in-house we'll prepare some of the environmental permit documents. And with that, are there any questions on the first water line improvement, the PSA with Harper, Hoff, Peterson, Regalis?
Well,
I just wanted to give some background for people who haven't been here quite as long as I have. This spiral welded steel pipe, much of it actually dates back to being World War II surplus. It was originally created to be gasoline pipeline in Europe, in the European theater for World War II. It was never intended to be buried. It was never intended to carry water. The fact that it has lasted, what, almost 60 years now is pretty amazing. But we do have to dig it up and replace it. We have done that as part of the downtown core when Reflection Plaza was rebuilt and all of the new streets were put in there. We replaced all those water lines. And we pretty much replaced all of it in the E Street corridor as part of the E Street project. So it exists in a number of places in the city, but mostly in the older parts of the city. I think they stopped putting it in the ground in the early 1950s. Since then, we use a little higher quality pipe. In fact, ductile iron is pretty much the standard these days. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but I think the design life on that's like 100 years.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you.
So, especially, and the two dissimilar metals hooking copper to galvanized pipe, that creates effectively it creates a battery which then dissolves one side of the pipe. And so you get those problems if you ever connect aluminum to steel or aluminum to copper or copper to zinc. Zinc galvanizing is zinc. So that's any place that you have those kinds of things. They were done in a day long gone when people were not as well informed or cautious about doing such things as we are today. So it's part of what we're doing here is fixing a problem that people buried in the ground 50 years ago.
Joyce?
I have a question. It just caught my attention. Was the all contracts with a value of more, I guess that's plus or minus $100,000, shall require that the awarded contractor be registered with the Department of Homeland Security. Where does that come in? Why?
That's actually our E-Verify program that we have, and it's basically to make sure that contractors employ people that have the right to work in the United States, legal citizens. So that's what, and we have a $100,000 cutoff right now. I think in the near future we're going to be bringing that forward again to the council to look at maybe some other options as far as lowering that dollar amount.
Thank you.
Other questions for Jim? Okay, moving on to a PSA with Brown and Caldwell for dredging lagoon biosolids.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Guard. Yes, this is another professional service agreement. We have some lagoons down there at the treatment plant, and this is kind of an overhead for some of the new members of the councils, and it shows the different cells or lagoons, as we'd like to call them. I know there's been a few council members that I think are smiling right now. They've been down there and actually looked at this firsthand. So, yeah, basically is what we have are biosolids that come through the process, that are processed through the plant. And this is where they end up, are in these cells. Over the years, these cells have become full to capacity. So we need to get in there, dredge these cells, and remove those biosolids. And then we would like to land apply those biosolids. And there's some permitting requirements that we'll have to go through, and we'll probably have to coordinate, well, we will have to coordinate with Department of Ecology, but Brown and Caldwell will help us out with this process, and they're gonna help us out with some document review that we need to have submitted to Ecology. They're gonna have a sampling plan that they're gonna put together, and they're going to sample and review all the raw data. They're going to prepare bid documents similar to the water line improvements. We'll have some bid documents for contractors to go off of, and then they'll conduct a pre-bid meeting and then some contractor selection. There'll be quality assurance and quality control, and then they'll help us out with project management as well. So these biosolids, they can be, fairly nasty, with heavy metals, and there's different pathogens that can be in the biosolids. One real difficult piece of this will be drying them to a point that we can, haul them off and actually land apply them. They're still kind of a liquid state, but you have to get most of the water out of it before you can even apply it to the land. So that's what we have before you, and this is a budgeted item, and we're asking that council authorize the mayor to sign this professional service agreement with Brown and Caldwell. Are there any questions on the biosolids professional service agreement?
Anything from council? I think we're good, Jim. Thank you. Both those will be coming forward this next Monday, or 2 Mondays from now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay, now next we have a discussion item. I know Councilman Russell had asked that this be brought forward. We didn't realize that he was going to be absent this evening. We actually have a presentation that has been asked to be brought forward from a community organization at the same time. So Samantha Lockhart, welcome.
Thank
think
you.
yourself and Larry maybe going to tag team a little, or are you pretty much going to take everything? Okay.
I'm going to try to
We're
load.
an excellent team. I was just going to pass these around to you.
Oh, sure.
Pass them to anyone who'd like it. Just a little packet of some information on this if you go on. Since I only have a few minutes.
I'm going to try to get this pulled up here.
Yeah, as he's pulling that up, I just wanted to say I've gotten to meet with most of you folks on council, and I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for that and for taking the time out to meet with Larry and I. Every time that we had a conversation with each and every one of you, have brought some really important questions and ideas forward, and that helped us to better shape this presentation and better shape what our proposal is as we bring it to you. So hopefully, if you have any more questions, we hope to continue to improve. But I just really appreciate all of your input throughout this whole process. It's been incredibly helpful. See how this goes. So most of this will probably sound somewhat familiar, but I thought I'd bring you all kind of up to speed and just a bit of a refresher course on everything that we've talked about. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about the coal export proposals that have been brought forward here in the Pacific Northwest and the impact that that would have on the city of Washougal and some things we can do. So yeah, I'd like to go. You can just click through till the whole slide is populated. Yeah, I don't know why I did this. So this is just a little bit of a map of all the proposals and possible export terminals in the Northwest. The ones that are furthest along right now, if you look up at the top, are Bellingham and Longview. So essentially what's being proposed are several coal companies that are looking at exporting coal from the Pacific Northwest to Asia. And they are taking the coal from the Powder River Basin in Wyoming and Montana, which you can't really see on this map, but there's a little arrow that comes up here. And though there are some other train lines that could take them up to Bellingham because of the mountains there, that with coal being such a heavy product to transport, most of the trains, from everything that we've been able to learn from the coal companies, it's indicated that they would come through here in Washougal and down through the BNSF rail lines here and then up to Longview and Bellingham respectively. So those are the two that we're looking at. St. Helens is also, I sort of highlighted the ones, the projects that are the furthest along that we know the most about. So St. Helens is the other thing on the horizon, though that just came up recently in the last week. So again, I'm focusing here on Bellingham and Longview, also because they're the Washington proposals. So, all right, great. So just these two proposals, the Longview, it's Millennium Coal and then Ombre Energy and Arch Coal that are proposing it, and they're proposing between 25 and 80 million tons of coal in their export terminal. The Bellingham terminal would be between 24 and 48 million tons. So combined, I just just to give you some idea, it's between, we would look at somewhere between, if both projects were to go forward, 49 and 128 million tons annually of coal. We can go to the next slide. So what that means for Washougal is that for every 50 million tons of coal that's transported, that means another 20 additional coal trains that are 1.5 miles long. So if even at the lowest end of the spectrum, if both proposals were to go through, we'd be looking at 20 additional coal trains per day moving through town. That could be as much as 40 or more per day. And that, you know, depending on how quickly they're going and how many times they have to stop and start again at the at-grade crossings, that can be anywhere from 1 to 3 hours a day of noise and traffic delays and congestion for citizens here in Washougal. So this was something Connie Jo, Councilmember Freeman, sorry, was able to brought to our attention, was the idea of actually pointing out where all the at-grade crossings are here in town. So I just took, this is just a map of Washougal, and I sort of tried to, my rudimentary marking of where they are. So you can see, you know, the train crossings go right through the middle of town and really divide up the community a little bit. So, you know, if folks are trying to get to Main Street, or if emergency services are trying to get to the northern part of town, you can see that would mean a lot of additional delays for citizens in Washougal. Right now, BNSF doesn't, it's not public information as to how many trains they have running. That's private information. But there have been studies that have been done to research that. So the most recent one that I could find was from 2006. So it's not 100% updated, but as of then, there were an average of 28 trains per day on that line, and the capacity is 36. So as you can see, an additional 20 trains would be beyond the capacity. So you can imagine that pretty much means that it would be an additional, it would mean additional rail improvements would be, additional rail improvements would be required for the project to move forward, and possibly even double tracking throughout. So that's what we are imagining and foreseeing would happen if these proposals were to move forward. And that, as you can imagine, would have serious implications for Washougal and some of the infrastructure plans that you have. So the other problem that we foresee with coal exports is the impact on the economy. As you know, constant coal train traffic and really constant rail traffic in general can impact property value and turn away developers. There was a study done in 2005 that found that you know, communities that had a huge number of freight trains where property values were 5 to 7% lower in those places. So there's a serious impact on home values. The rail delays also can deter patronage of small businesses. So you can imagine if you're getting in your car thinking, I'm going to go down and get an ice cream cone at Papa's, but you know that you're going to have to pass an at-grade crossing to get there, and that's going to mean you might have to end up sitting, be more likely to end up sitting and waiting. And if that, you know, if that train actually has to stop and then start again, the delays can be really significant, and that may just be another impediment to folks actually patronizing businesses. And then the last component here that we can foresee is that the impacts to tourism-based economies. And you know, we live in a beautiful place. I should have said this first, but I'm with Friends of the Columbia Gorge. I think most of you folks know that. So we think a lot about the gorge and how beautiful it is. And National Geographic actually came out and said that it was this. They did a ranking of all of the most beautiful places in the world and the best places to visit, and the gorge was number 6 on their list. So it's an absolutely fabulous place to visit. As you know, many people come here every year for tourism and for hiking and windsurfing, and this is the gateway to the gorge. So folks should be coming here and enjoying, you know, lunch as before and after their hike, and staying overnight and going windsurfing the next day. And you can imagine if there are lots of coal trains running through every day, that's a deterrent for making Washougal that kind of community where people want to come, you know, when as they're coming here for tourism and for windsurfing. And then the last component here is a threat to health. Coal dust. These coal trains, as of right now, are uncovered. We don't have a ton of legal authority to force coal companies to cover the trains, though I can imagine that would be ideal. But as of right now, and as far in the foreseeable future, they're not planning, as far as we can tell, on covering these coal trains. And according to BNSF, they estimate that between 500 and 2,000 pounds of coal dust gets dislodged from each car of the coal train over the course of the trip. A lot of that is at the beginning of the trip, but as you can imagine, over the course of a year, that's a lot of coal dust getting into our air and into the community. And the additional thing here is also diesel exhaust emissions with that many additional trains that include a ton of toxic substances like arsenic, benzene, formaldehyde. Now, just a word on the coal dust, you'll see a lot more information on the health impacts in your packets. So if you have questions about that, you can definitely look into it. Most of the studies that have been done with coal-related health impacts have been done in loading communities, so places where it's being in the Powder River Basin, for example, where the coal is actually being loaded onto the trains or at the beginning of the trip, or at places where the coal is actually being burned. So there isn't a breadth of knowledge on what exactly the impacts would be to a rail community like Washougal. But you can imagine with the toxic substances in coal dust that we know exist and the amount of coal dust and number of coal trains running through town that there would be some health impacts. So what can we do and why we want to do it? Now, as the next step as these proposals move forward is that there are going to be environmental impact statements, and the SEPA and NEPA process is going to be starting in the state of Washington. And as part of that, they're going to be looking for public comment and to hear from folks in impacted communities to find out what are the impacts of this project, what's the scope of the project. And we want to ensure they could decide that Bellingham is, for example, is the export terminal, and that's where those are the folks who should get to have a say in this decision. We think that, as you can see, this would have an impact to folks all along the rail route and to all sorts of communities across the state. And so folks across the state should get to have input in the process. So the reason why you should take action is that Washougal citizens and the community should get to have a say in what's going on as this proposal moves forward. And what can you do? The good thing is folks are going to listen when Washougal speaks on this issue. I think you folks are in a really powerful position. I think Washougal is a community that doesn't often speak up unless they have something important to say. And I think people across the state are going to recognize that if Washougal is saying something about this issue, they should really listen. So I think for that reason, passing a resolution here would have a really big impact across the state. So that is why we're looking to pass the resolution. So hopefully I didn't take too long with all of that and wasn't too repetitive. So I do want to allow you folks time to discuss and digest. But if you have any questions for Larry or I as we move forward, I didn't put my email up here, but I think you all have it. It's pretty easy to remember. It's smith@gorgefriends.org, or you can come up to me afterwards and chat. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Samantha. Larry?
Thank you, Council. And I'd like to represent a citizen of Washougal, even though I am connected with Friends of the Gorge. I'm concerned about the delays that this is going to potentially cause for us, the citizens of the community. We're talking about economic development moving forward in our community, and this potentially has the ability to divide our community in half. What we're asking for is simply that we have a seat at the table with the railroad. When the railroad makes any plans for any new expansion of the rail facilities, we would like to know, about that. They will make changes to their trackage as they see fit, without any input from the city or any discussion with the city. 2 weeks ago, we talked about an overpass at 27th Street. That overpass that was being designed was for single trackage. If they put double trackage in, that means that design that the city has developed wouldn't be adequate. I mean, it would not fit. It would have to be wider, wider overpass. So things like that are going to impact us significantly. We're just asking that the railroad provides a representative to meet with interested citizens groups and our local government, so we know what their plans are and how we can make adjustments accordingly. The environmental impact statement that will be developed for this project, we would like to have an opportunity to be involved with what does that say. Now, when they come to, the monitoring of groundwater, air quality, and the testing information that the local governments will get, we need to be involved with that. We need to have a seat at the table where we know what it is that it's affecting our citizens. We know that there's a potential for coal dust contamination, but what is that? What is that potential? We don't really know yet. We want to know, what is the impact going to be for delaying our traffic, especially at 32nd Street, which we've discussed at length. And we know that that's a critical intersection for us, yet we don't have the funding to, to do a lot with it now. But, this is something that's going to come up that will, definitely impact 32nd Street. And be involved with improvement plans for grading, widening, and otherwise improving crossings and intersections that would be impacted by the rail traffic. Possibly we could ask the railroad, we need an overpass at 27th Street because we need to be able to get from the north side of town to the south side of town. Possibly there could be some financial benefits for the community. So what we're asking the council to do is simply draft a resolution that would request that we have a seat at the table, so we're involved with the discussions, and we know how this is going to impact our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Questions from council, comments, Dave?
I hear a lot of assumptions here. I'm going to challenge you on one of them. You say that coal exports harm the economy. I say that they help the economy. First of all, they reduce foreign trade deficits, which is a major problem in this country, because this coal is probably going to China or India. We hold a major trade deficit with China. This will help that. It also provides jobs to Americans, which I think is a good idea. Not just jobs, but high-paying jobs. Railroad jobs are high-paying jobs. And there will be economic fallout, the multiplier effect and all that sort of thing from the money that comes in from this. This is foreign money coming into this country. We haven't seen much of that lately. It's all been going the other way. I heard a lot of assumptions during your presentation tonight. And before I think generally it's a good idea that we be represented at the table with the railroad. I'd love to do that. But I don't want to go to the railroad and say, give us a seat at the table until I know there's a problem. So I ask you a series of questions. What studies document the pollution you're talking about? How much of a health threat do these studies document? What studies document the health threat of increased diesel fuel burning? Because railroads are the cheapest, cleanest way to move heavy freight. And what is the extent of coal dust contamination, ton per mile?
Those are really great questions. Thank you. I appreciate them. First, addressing the question of my assertions on the impact to the economy. When I was discussing that, I was speaking of the local economy here in Washougal. I wasn't speaking on the national scale. So I was talking more about local small businesses in downtown Washougal and the impacts to those. In terms of the jobs that would be created, so a small number of jobs would be created mostly at the export terminals. No jobs essentially that we can foresee would come to anyone living in the city of Washougal. So that's sort of the scope that I'm thinking of, is the impact just to the city, and there would also be no additional tax revenue.
I would disagree with you on that, by the way, and I'll explain that.
Okay. And I'm sorry, the second part of the question was about the health impacts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. As in the packet, you'll see a couple of studies that were done by a number of doctors. There are 160 doctors in Whatcom County, where Bellingham is located, that signed on opposing the coal export projects. And they put together a couple of studies, and some of the citations are in there. If you'd like more of the citations, I can get you that information or email you that information. There have been some studies done on the health impacts, particularly related to diesel. The coal dust studies are in there as well, and I can get you that information by email after today. So, thank
I'd
you
like
for
to
that.
see them. I'm a professional researcher, and I'll evaluate them for methodology.
Okay.
I want to know the length of time that the studies went on. Short-term studies are almost meaningless.
Right.
I want to know who the primary researcher was, what staff were involved, where they gathered their data, how they structured their research and their data gathering.
Absolutely.
I'll evaluate all that.
Yeah.
And if you've got a good case, you'll get my support.
All right.
But I'm not in favor of trying to stop economic development over threats which haven't been documented.
Okay. Well, I'll get you those studies, and I appreciate your question. Thank you. And if I don't know, are other folks allowed to respond at all? Okay. Great.
Paul?
Thank you.
I would suggest that neither Samantha nor Larry are the appropriate source for that kind of information, and I certainly am not. On the other hand, that is exactly the function of an environmental impact statement, is to gather that information together, is to gather that research. My concern is that if the environmental impact statement covers only the terminals, Powder River Basin and Bellingham or Longview, then they absolutely do not consider the impacts to our community, whether they're impacts on emergency service response times because the crossings are shut down, or the economic impact, or the coal dust impact. I mean, I lived in Pennsylvania, so I know a little bit about black lung, but on the other hand, I'm not sure that that really applies. On the other hand, to have an actual environmental impact statement that addresses those questions, without that information, I agree with you that we're operating in a vacuum. But that's the function of an environmental impact statement, is to gather that information. And so what I would hope is that we would pass a resolution which says we foresee potential impacts and that we want the environmental impact statement to look at the entire route, or specifically Washougal, and not just the two terminal areas, because the impacts are much broader than just the two terminal areas. If we don't do something here, then only Bellingham and Wyoming will have anything to say. And I think, just on the face of it, it appears that there will be significant impacts in our community, and I'd like to know what they are. And that's the function of an environmental impact statement, is to identify them.
Other council members? Okay.
I just had a quick question. Maybe Administrator Scott can answer this for me. Our relationship with Burlington Northern, we have recently done work with them with this train silencing. Maybe we can kind of talk about our relationship with them, and if we do indeed have open communications with the railroad already.
I think we have a great relationship locally with the staff that are here and our specific facilities for a project like this that would be back in their corporate area. I think we have an into that. Jim is much more intimate with
Okay, great.
with our relationship
Would
and
you
how
be comfortable
we
talking about that?
engage them.
Sure. Excellent.
Yeah, recently we went through the quiet zone process. So, I say recently, it was a few years ago, obviously. we have some different numbers as far as the amount of trains that come through town than were in this presentation. Actually, our numbers are a little higher. But we do have a good relationship with the local engineer. We have a roadmaster that works with us as well. And some of the coordination we're doing out on 32nd Street and, you know, all the crossings. So we do have a good relationship. One of the things that we discussed recently, we were talking about increased traffic to the Port of Vancouver. And I believe it was fly ash that was possibly going to be transported through the Fallbrook corridor. And we talked to Rick Wegner. He is their engineer there, and he said that yeah, the tracks are not near capacity now. That they could actually run a train through every half hour. So you know, you're looking at 24 hours. That's 48 trains. So that's quite a few trains along that in that corridor. And you know, the concerns on 32nd, we've talked about grade separation with 27th as well. So to the extent that we know the local people is one thing, but dealing with BNSF, they're a very large organization, and sometimes it can be problematic getting to the right person. I don't know if that answers your question, but
It does. It does. Can you hear me? Okay. My light's not working. Okay. And I have one more question, maybe for Samantha or Larry, regarding the current regulations. Are there any current regulations as far as how long a train can be, or if there's a tonnage sort of a regulation or anything like that? Do you know if there are any current
I'm not
laws?
Sure if I understand the question. Sorry.
Well, you're saying that the trains will be longer and heavier. Are there any laws currently on the books talking about regulations as far as that is concerned?
Sorry if I misrepresented that. These trains would be not very much longer than what coal trains typically are, and they're about the same weight. My comment about their weight was regarding the fact that they were transporting coal. Coal trains are generally always this weight. It just means that it makes it harder to transport them up the mountain. So they would come down the mountain after the trains were empty, according to documentation we found.
Okay, so they just make kind of a loop then, coming
Right.
through from Wyoming, kind of down and then up
Yeah.
and then back over the mountain, but empty.
Yes, exactly.
And it's the same
Precisely.
cars and such that are carrying a lot of other types of freight.
Yeah.
So we're not.
The same types of size and weight that is typical for coal in general. And I'm sorry, there might be folks who can correct me on this later on down the road. I'm still learning myself, so I don't want to speak 100%. So I can also check up on that for you before I assert something. I can't back up, so I apologize on that.
Great.
But I can go back and do my homework. Great, thank you.
I was just going to answer that if I could for a second. Generally, the length and the weight of a train is limited by the route, depending on the grade and how many turns and how tight they are. If you're going across Nebraska, you can run a really long train. If you're switchbacking through Colorado, it has to be a lot shorter.
Okay, Joe?
Couple of things. You gave us some paperwork when we met one-on-one the other day, and it talks about some facts here that says 20 to 30 additional 1.5 mile long trains. So these trains are 1.5 miles. I live over near 32nd Street, and I know that when a train stops, it's going to stop just east of 32nd. And I'm just curious how long it takes a train that's filled with coal, that's 1.5 miles long. How long does it take that train to get going? And then with your map that you showed us, I don't know if everybody really got the big picture, but we have 5 at-grade crossings in our city, and only one road that goes up and over. So that's just frightening to me. I can't imagine our little town adding that much more. So I'm just curious about how railroads work and their freedoms. Do they have the freedom to run as many trains as they want? Who calls that? Is that in agreement? Does the city have any freedom in that or input to that?
Yeah, the city really doesn't have any say in that regard. The FRA handles it federally.
FRA stands for?
It's the Federal Railroad Administration. And then there's also the State Utility Commission, and that's with the state of Washington. So those are the two regulatory agencies that deal with railroads.
So can we find out? I mean, I guess, I mean, I don't know if we're in a stage of research now, but what kind of limits are there for our little town? I mean, that, of course, if any.
If any.
Yes.
Larry?
By federal regulation, a through train can only block a crossing for 10 minutes. But in the case where you brought up, they stopped a train east of 32nd Street, a coal train that's not moving, depending on the amount of power or locomotives they have at the front end of that will amount to how fast they can get it going. But it would exceed a 10-minute delay per train at that crossing to get a train of that heavy moving. A coal train, an average, what they normally put together is a little over a mile long, and to get it up to speed takes about 7 miles.
And how long is our city?
It's probably just at 1.5 miles from edge to edge if you went down the tracks. Maybe less than that.
Look at that, yeah.
Yeah, from 32nd to 6th, 3rd, it might be 2 miles.
So is
East
anyone?
Street's a 2-mile, corridor that we just had that was 2 miles, the East Street project. So if that gives you any indication.
Just curious if your committee is documenting all of these questions that you run across, that we bring up tonight. I'm sure you've already asked them yourself, but it'd be good to see them all in writing.
Yeah. I'll be getting a tape up tonight too. I can go back and make sure I get everything right down. Thank you.
Other council members? Going to Dave first.
Dave.
Back for second ones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question of whether or not you should have to prove your case has been brought up by my colleague, Mr. Greenlee. And I don't mean this to sound harsh, but if you bring it here, you need to bring the proof with it. I'm depending on you to give me that information. Environmental impact statements, I've never seen one that wasn't at least a notebook, and usually 2 or 3 notebooks. Secondly, I don't have a lot of faith in them because they start out with a fundamental bias, and their methodology, their data gathering, everything reflects that bias. So I don't have a lot of faith in environmental impact statements. The other thing is that if you're going to add Washougal to the environmental impact report, you're going to increase the time that it takes to get the statement done. And so you're asking for a resolution from the council. What I'm looking for from you is make the case. You make that case, I'll support you. And I'll look at your data, and I'll show you where the strengths and the weaknesses of it are. That's what I do. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Jennifer?
Yes. Samantha, I have another question for you, hon. I'm sorry. Have you talked to any of the other small cities along the route and kind of given them the same information, and what has been your response?
We're in the early stages of this process, so Washougal is one of the communities that we identified as being potentially impacted the most, so that's one of the reasons we came here first. But we are talking to other communities. We're talking to Camas in particular. They're going to be considering a similar resolution at a workshop early next month. And we've also touched base somewhat with folks in Vancouver. So I work mostly in Southwest Washington. There are folks working all over the state, so I can't speak 100% on everything that's been done so far. I know Edmonds has already passed a resolution, and there are folks talking about this in small communities across Washington.
Other questions, comments from council? Jim or Dave, if you can remember back to the presentation that we had from the Port of Vancouver officials on the potash trains, which are an additional 20 to 40 that will eventually go through town as well to that terminal down at the Port of Vancouver. Did they not, I may be dreaming this, did they not tell us that those cars that the potash is being transported in are a newly designed car to carry potash?
I do not recall.
We can ask that tomorrow.
I do not recall as far as the cars go.
We can go back and take a look or find out quickly.
It seems like there was something in their presentation about being able to stop the leakage of the material itself coming out of the cars. And that would be a question that I've got. You know, most of my concerns, well, I've got some concern on the at-grade crossings and what we end up with additional congestion there by the time you get done with additional numbers of the coal trains, and I know they're already going through town now. I know I've watched them from the overpass passing through town, but if we've got another 20 to 40 of those, we've got another 20 of 40 of potash within the next 2 years that'll be starting up. You know, at what point are we expecting different changes and failures of our at-grade crossings as far as the amount of time that's there? Even that though, if they all manage to pass at the best time, everything else, one thing that worries me and Jim, if we can try and follow up with our contacts at Burlington Northern in the information that we have from the Dallas-Port Murdoch Community Council, they reference in here that Burlington Northern has said that each coal car loses 500 to 2,000 pounds of coal in transit, and that was a study by Burlington Northern themselves. My concern would be that they somehow have some sort of sealers on those cars that keep it, whether it's, you know, rubber blankets down below, covers over the top, something that helps keep that out of the community. I'm not sure. I'm sure that there are folks out there that can do studies that can tell you, you know, how much coal we've got along sections of track now versus, you know, 2 years from now or any of that type of thing. But I would venture to guess that 2 years from now, if we decide that they're at levels that are in danger of, or that are health concerns, we're probably too late at that point to try and make any changes to that. So I'm not sure how much information the Port of Bellingham and the City of Bellingham may have as well. I know the mayor of Bellingham was on a significant effort last year during the summertime. I think they ended up losing, for the most part, their fight for that terminal up there, of not wanting it there purely from the health concerns that they had of being the terminus for all of that coming through the states and then heading out across the ocean. So if there's some way that we can follow up with that, and I may see him on Wednesday or Thursday of this week as well. So, go ahead, Joe.
Samantha made a statement that the coal companies didn't want to put the money out to cover them, that it was financially sound for them to lose that much coal than to spend the money on tarps to cover them. And of course, so that's sort of in the face of the ecological situation there.
Yeah, my concern wouldn't be how much profit they make. It's as they pass through our community or somebody else's community that we don't end up with that on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to go somewhere if they're losing, and if by Burlington Northern's own statements are losing 500 to 2,000 pounds per car, that's a lot. And we're well past halfway through the the journey, but we're still part of the journey, so. And that stuff keeps moving against itself. Paul?
I have one comment and then one question. Generally speaking, coal cars are left uncovered because they can load them faster and empty them faster. That's really the economics, not so much the cost of the cover. There are a number of large power plants where they literally take the cars through a spiral so that they dump the coal directly out of the car without ever tripping the bottom gates, and they can run the trains through at 10 miles an hour and do that. So the issue is time, and can you do it automated? You start putting tarps on top of cars, and that requires huge amounts of labor, and so that's the cost issue, not how much the covers themselves cost. Then the other question I have is Jim, would you have Rob Charles take a quick kind of finger in the wind? Suppose Burlington Northern did double track. I don't remember what the minimum standards were on how far we had to have lane separation back from the track in order to maintain a quiet zone.
It's 100 feet.
But
Well, we don't have that at 32nd either.
Right. But if they double track, where else are we in trouble for that?
Just working on the quiet zone, I don't foresee much trouble there. I think we
Okay.
have right of way right now to put a second track in through town, so.
Yeah, I know that the general attitude of the railroad typically is, we were here first, and they really were. Their land grants go back to at least the 1860s or 70s. So, but I was just curious if double tracking might limit our quiet zones.
And there is a possibility. I definitely have to look at it. There's 100 feet from the crossing gate to the first wing, I guess you could say, for any driveway approach. Now that was, we had some factors that limited us on 32nd Street, so it wasn't required there, but the other crossings it was required. We had to eliminate some approaches, some driveway approaches and things like that to get the quiet zone in place.
Thank you.
David?
This is the 500 to 2,000 pounds. I noted that in your presentation. It's an interesting statistic, but it really doesn't have any meaning. The meaning comes in when you figure out how long is the trip, and how is that 500 to 2,000 pounds per car distributed, and in what form is it distributed? And of course, there's an assumption there. The assumption is that it's evenly distributed. And I haven't seen your study, but I'd be willing to bet that that's one of their assumptions.
Just to address that one question, I will say, and I think I said during the presentation, that it's not 100% evenly distributed. A lot of the dust that comes off is at the beginning of the trip, and then distributed. Those studies are still happening right now.
Okay, so the significant statistic would be 500 to 2,000 pounds per mile. And since we're talking about Washougal, in Washougal, because you've indicated a lot of it happens at Powder River Basin. I'm not sure why that is. I'd be interested to find that out. And I'll look for that. You don't need to provide that.
Yeah, it just as soon as the coal is loaded, it's when it's the most loose and easy to come off. After it's been riding for a while, it gets packed down a little bit more. So there's less being dislodged over the course of the trip. That's sort of my non-scientific, rudimentary understanding of
So
how it
you're
works.
going to see the same sort of environmental impact when you offload it and load it onto the ship?
That's true.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Joe.
Just curious, I know we have a double track at 32nd. Do we have double tracks anywhere else on crossings?
I think only east of 32nd, well, and part of 32nd itself, but pretty much terminus is there.
And that's really sidings also.
I'm sorry?
That's really sidings. There's,
Pull off.
there's really only one mainline track through town.
That's just so they can offload trains or
Well, so the
cars.
trains can
They change
pass
it.
each other.
They change out
pass.
crews or be able to pull off to let others go the other direction.
And then the only other place that, if you looked at it, you'd say, oh, that's double track, is when they split the track to run the spur out into the port. There's a piece there where you have
Right.
parallel track before the spur takes off.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from council? Sounds like you've got some information you're going to get back to us, and we're going to ask a few questions as well, and then see where we end up at a future date. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you for your time. For your questions.
Okay, we're at that point in the agenda. If there are any members of the public that would like to address council again. Yes.
Sorry.
Good evening, Council. My name is John Hallen, and I'd like to thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you this evening. I kind of belong to the Washington Citizens for Responsible Government group with Chuck Miller is our big boss. And what I came to talk to you about is E-Verify. It was a nice segue. So, E-Verify is first of all, it's an internet-based program that's sponsored by the Social Security and Homeland Security together. And when you use E-Verify, you basically put a Social Security number in there that has been issued to a person who put it on an I-9 application form when they applied for employment at the employer's office. So that Social Security number you already have, you put that into the system on the internet, and it's like I said, the internet is free, and so it doesn't require any labor or anything else, and within just a very short period of time, less than 24 hours, in fact, I probably think it's even shorter than that, you will have a response as to whether the individual that you're wanting to hire does in fact have legal status to work in this country. Which I think is good for everybody. It saves the jobs for American citizens, and it does not allow the employer to hire illegal aliens. Another thing that's good about that program is that the federal government has said that they do not want illegal citizens taking these jobs. So what they do is, if they find out about it, ICE will fine the employer a giant amount of money. So it's good both for the employer and for the individual that's being checked up on. The other thing about it is that years ago I used to have to file these employment applications, and I always had to give my credentials. Well, this is nothing more than the same thing. This is an employer's ability to check a person's credentials, as it were. And so anyhow, it's a really good program. We have several people in the state of Washington that are under the program now. I think there's, it says right here, it says over 5,000 employers are using E-Verify in the state of Washington. So we were here to see if we could get Washougal to be part of this process, both the city of Washougal and employers that have applications for licenses within the city of Washougal, employers that need to hire people. So with that, I would like to say thank you very much, and I'll turn you over to Chuck Miller, who has a lot more to say. If you have any questions, you can ask him. Thank you very much.
John, could we get your last name?
Hallinan, H-A-L-L-I-N-E-N. It's on the sign-in roster out in front.
Okay, great. Is your address on there as well?
No, I didn't put that on. I just put Washington Citizens for Responsible Government.
If we could get your address for the record.
I'll put it out there. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, Chuck Miller, Director of Washington Citizens for Responsible Government. Thank you for letting us come tonight. We are aware that you are using E-Verify, And our main reason for coming is we believe that, since you are using it, that it should be required for every contractor and subcontractor to use, because, for example, if you have a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit in a school zone, okay, is that for everyone to use, or is that just for some to use? So if you do have a law that you are asking, contractors and subcontractors to follow, it's only fair that they all, be required to use it. Also, in regards to businesses, in 2009, part of 2010, there were over $50 million in fines issued by Immigration's Customs Enforcement to employers that had hired illegal aliens. And Yamamoto Motors up here in Bellingham, they were fined $100,000. And now they are using E-Verify. So if you offer, your businesses here, they have a business license, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So what we would like to have you take a look at and talk to them and say, E-Verify would be really a good thing for you to use, because it's going to protect your business and it's going to put American citizens to work. And this is Yakult requires all businesses, to use E-Verify. Okay. Well, do you have any questions or?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm curious, have you seen any studies on false results? Either people who were approved who shouldn't have been, or what my real fear would be, people who are citizens who were turned down.
The statistics are about 96% of them clear within a matter of seconds, okay?
No, I'm concerned about an error rate, not speed.
There's very small error rate. In fact, the only thing that would happen is if someone had changed their name, they got, a lady, got married and her name was changed and they didn't quite have that straightened out yet when she applied, okay? And then they would have a period of time to work that out and resubmit that, but yeah, there's the error in the E-Verify is very small. This is why it's growing in leaps and bounds in the amount of businesses, employers that are using this in Washington State.
Then the other question that I have in terms of dealing with a contractor, for example, we bought a color copier from Minolta for about $25,000. How in the world could we have Minolta say that they have to do E-Verify?
You're talking about contractors and subcontractors that are doing work for you?
We bought a copier from Minolta. Or suppose we bought a car from Toyota.
Okay, we're talking about apples and oranges right now in that, okay, because they're not doing any contract work or subcontract work for the city of Washougal. You're going out, you're just buying something. That's a whole different situation.
These are competitive bid contracts we're talking about.
If they're
I'm going to go ahead and stop this one at this point. Again, this is comments from the public towards council, so I don't want to get into something where we're back and forth on questions and answers and debate.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Chuck. You bet. Any other members of the public wishing to address council? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Laura Stevens, and I'm a representative of the Sierra Club for Southwest Washington. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to discuss the issue of coal trains coming through Washougal and the impacts to the community.
Laura, could we get your address, please?
I live in Portland.
That's fine.
Okay, it's 5835 Southwest Nevada Court.
Thank you.
Portland, Oregon. So just a couple of things that came up before about potash. My understanding is that the containers are closed because moisture affects the potash, so there isn't a concern of potash dust or substances coming out of the cars. And another issue is that with the coal dust is that the large chunks that come off of the trains closest to the mines are actually, large chunks of coal. That's not the sort of thing that gets into your lungs. It's the smaller particulate matter. And the PM 2.5, the smallest particulate matter that you can't even see with your eyes, is especially dangerous to the lungs because it gets very deep and lodges into your lungs. So I just wanted to bring those 2 points up. And I work with some health professionals in Portland that are well versed in the health impacts of coal exports and of coal trains, and extrapolating the studies that have been done at coal mines, at coal terminals, onto the impacts that we might see along the rail community. So I'm happy to connect you with those individuals.
That would be great.
Great. And then I'd like to read a statement by Marcia Dilley, who wasn't able to come tonight. She is a Washougal resident. My name's Marcia Dilley, and I own the A. Yorstown Chimney Incorporated on E Street, and I reside on C Street. So I just have C Street. I don't have her full address, but I can look that up for you if you want.
We know where she's at.
Okay, great. And I'm deeply concerned with the proposal to bring an additional 20 or more coal trains through Washougal. But I was unable to make the meeting tonight, so I've asked Laura Stevens to read this statement on my behalf. As someone who lives and works a block from the train tracks, I have health concerns about coal dust coming out of the open coal train cars. Coal dust contains many toxic substances such as mercury, arsenic, and lead, and is linked to lung cancer and asthma. And it amazes me that they're not required to cover these coal cars. I used to transport potatoes, and we would have to cover those trucks, and potatoes are not harmful to our health. Right now, we have 1 or 2 coal trains passing through daily, and that could be cause enough for concern. But 20 or more would greatly increase the health risk to the community. Also, extra diesel pollution from 20 or more trains coming through would certainly not help with air quality. Diesel fumes also contain toxic chemicals linked to cancer. As a business owner, it's important to me that we make Washougal as friendly to potential customers as possible. 20 or more coal trains, each 1.5 miles long, coming through every day is going to make for more traffic holdups and longer wait times. I'm concerned this would dissuade customers from coming into town to shop or to prevent people from wanting to live or develop new housing or business developments in Washougal. With these coal trains, we have a lot to lose and nothing to gain. It seems as simple as that. And it seems that people that stand to profit are only the out-of-state and foreign coal companies that want to make a buck off of polluting our air and decreasing our quality of life. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you use your power as the City Council to mitigate and prevent impacts of these coal trains on our community. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. If you could, the letter, if you could give to Rose right there, would be great. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Kramer, and I'm here as an educator to talk about the impacts on students that trains coming through would bring. Tonight I'm expressing my
Debbie,
personal view.
Could we get your address for the record, please?
It's Vancouver, Washington.
Could we get your address, please?
Yes, 9914 St. Helens Avenue, Vancouver, Washington.
Thank you.
Tonight I am expressing my personal view, and I am not here as a representative of the Washougal School District. I am deeply concerned about the proposal to bring an additional 20 or more coal trains through the city, and I want to thank you for discussing this very important issue at your meeting tonight. As others have mentioned here tonight, coal trains have open air cars that emit coal dust. This coal dust contains mercury, arsenic, and lead, and is known to cause lung disease, including lung cancer, as well as asthma. Also, an additional 20 coal trains, which are heavy and long, so they require more fuel than your average train, means that much more diesel pollution, which contains more than 40 toxic substances linked to cancer and other health problems. Health professionals tell us that coal dust and diesel pollution are especially harmful to our health because it contains particulate matter too small for us to see that gets deep into our lungs. We should consider the public health implications that this air pollution has on the most vulnerable, the young children in the community. As you well know, Hathaway Elementary School is just a block from the train tracks, where students play and exercise on the playground during recess and sometimes during PE classes. Many families with young children also live close to the train tracks. Exposure to toxic air pollution from coal trains can put these children at risk to develop lung problems for life. We should also consider what sort of a legacy we are leaving the next generation. Bisecting Washougal with 1.5 mile long coal trains that hold up traffic, potentially block emergency vehicle access, and contribute to local air pollution is not the kind of legacy we should leave. Again, thank you for discussing this very important subject today. I hope that you do everything in your power to prevent these dirty and destructive coal exports proposals from impacting our community.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
My name is Diana Gordon, and my husband couldn't be here tonight. He's out of town right now. I live on 6th and I, where that water pipe is. And we also have a railroad crossing. And I'm at 642 I Street.
There's some heavy equipment soon to be seen in your neighborhood.
Something to look forward to. And we also own another house that we inherited. We're not going to keep it very long, but we're very concerned about the property values in this community. And recently we've heard several reports about the proposal by Millennium to ship coal via the Burlington Northern Railroad through Washington ports for use in Asia. This coal would be mined largely in Wyoming and shipped to Asia from a terminal in Longview. Along the way, it'll pass through Spokane and come down along the Columbia River. And I understand there are going to be more than 20 trains a day, and they'll all go through Washougal. According to calculations by the railroad, each car can lose 500 pounds of coal along the way, coal dust. There are numerous very real hazards associated with coal dust. This poses a substantial threat to our air quality and to the water quality of the Columbia River, and to the tributaries that trains would have to cross, like the Washougal. Coal dust inhalation has been shown to cause increased asthma, and especially in children, but also in some adults, and includes exposure to heavy toxic metals such as lead, selenium, and mercury. Washougal has several schools located near the tracks, as well as a few parks, our beaches in Lewis and Clark Park, and a national wildlife refuge. Now, unfortunately, Washington will receive a double dose of pollution when China, for example, burns the coal, and winds carry some of the pollution back to us. Increased diesel pollution further increases the health risks, and again, children are the most vulnerable. Traffic congestion could be a further problem. For some of us, access to Highway 14 is by crossing the tracks, and 20 trains a day is a lot. It could slow you down a lot. I think it might affect some nearby businesses as well. For example, there's a motel located very close to the railroad tracks, and all these trains have to be noisy. A lot of our motocross visitors stay there. We're further concerned about who's going to pay the bill for upgrading the existing rail bed. All in all, it does not seem to be in Washougal's or Southwest Washington's best interest for this venture to go forward. The multitude of problems cannot help but depress our property values further and discourage new business from coming here. A number of temporary construction jobs will probably be created in Longview, and maybe some more to work on the rail bed, but it's hard to think of any that will occur in Washougal. To us, this looks like a losing proposition for health, traffic, and financial reasons. We need to recover from the recession, not prolong it. Please pass a resolution to discourage this proposal from going forward, and do anything else you can think of to stop it. Thank you. And this is from my husband and myself, Thomas Gordon.
Thank you, Diana. Good evening.
Hello, my name's Paul Smith, and I live at 1482 Maybe Mines Road, Washougal. I'm actually in the west end of Skamania County. I've got many concerns for this, but they're primarily environmental. There's been minimal environmental studies done on the impacts of the dust coming off of these trains along the route. And living in the Columbia River Gorge, I'm very concerned about 500 to 2,000 pounds per car, which is about 100 cars per trip, times 20 to 50 trips a day through the National Scenic Area before it comes through your town. And that's simply not acceptable. I will agree with you, Mr. Schumacher, about environmental impact statements. They tend to be biased. This would be done by the proponents, so they would definitely want to minimize talk on the negatives about the dust coal coming off these rail cars. There could be the possibility of surfactants because they don't want to cover them, and I think that's, Mr. Greenlee, I think that's right. The amount of labor involved to cover and uncover every car, plus you've got a human up there who better be wearing some sort of protectant so they're not sucking that down to be able to cover that, is probably just a deal killer. The surfactants, what about the surfactants coming off these rail cars throughout the gorge that makes its own weather? Yeah, we have 100-mile-an-hour winds regularly, and what about all this rain we have? So that surfactant goes right down into the groundwater, goes right down into Steigerwald, goes down into the Columbia River. We have several species of anadromous fish that are listed, not to mention the native species of plants, flora and fauna in the Columbia River Gorge as well as throughout the Columbia River Basin that would be impacted by this. How do you quantify that? Well, the proponents don't have to right now. Tragically, there's not regulations to have to cover this coal. So, and for 20 to 50 cars per day, how much of this potential surfactant, if they were able to use something like that, would be coming off, let alone the coal. And I guess this coal dust can actually build up on the rock structure underneath the rail cars, or the railroad, and actually have caused spontaneous fires. The amount of wind that we have in the gorge to toss how much more coal off of these cars, it's going to be very difficult to quantify. And the Klickitat and Skamania County Fire Departments are all volunteer. So you can see that there'd be real issues in the summer with fires, potential fires from these rail cars. There has been a study in Norfolk, Virginia that showed up to 1% of coal dust found 12 kilometers away from the tracks. And with those winds in the gorge, how much further out would that go? So the kind of real impacts specifically to your town would be, to fire, police, and ambulance services at these 5 crossings, not to mention people having to wait to try to go across those. Most everyone lives north of the tracks. I come through this town twice a day, every day, to go to work in Northeast Portland, and so I can see that this would be a real nuisance for people wanting to go home if they live outside of town. And so all of this for coal going to Asia with little financial benefit to definitely this town, but anyone along the rail line. And so I just urge you to consider this resolution, and also the possibility of, if they were to try to do maybe an end around and say, okay, what about barge traffic then? Because that also is something that would impact your community and, of course, the beautiful National Scenic Area and the rest of the Columbia River Gorge. So I appreciate your time and allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any other members of the public? Martha?
Different topic. And this is to address your question earlier. I jumped on it too quick when I said no to your question about the art at Steamboat Landing, correct? Was that what you were asking? And I don't know all of the outcome of this, but I know that there's been a possible change, and Suzanne Batchelder would be someone to talk to you about this for the outcome. Originally, the donations that were for that artwork on Steamboat Landing were going through the Parks Foundation, the Clark County Parks Foundation. They said that was not an appropriate place for that money because this isn't about parks, it's about art. And so they approached us, the Clark County Arts Commission, and said, what should we do about that? Our suggestion was, how about using the arts of Clark County to put your donation funding through them instead? Now, I don't know if that's happened. Maybe you know. You don't know. At this point, Suzanne would know probably if that's actually happened or occurred. So does that answer your question a little better?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks, Martha. Any other members of the public? Yes, John.
John Wagner, 36710 Southeast 20th Street, Washougal. Just from what I've heard today, it seems to a couple of comments on the coal. It was mentioned the trade imbalance, balance of trade with China. That balance of trade, I just heard it today, in fact, in the high-tech industry, they pay their workers $17 a day, which makes it, of course, impossible to have a family wage job in America to compete with those jobs. So all the products that you see when you go to some of these major retailers made in China is contributing to this balance of trade. And for us to be sending bazillions of train loads of coal to China that fuels this economic engine, which in turn is causing the balance of trade again with America. So I wouldn't think that selling the energy raw material would be in any way helping us out. I think it would just continue to do that. The other issue, pollution, and a lot have been said about the pollution here, but as I understand, it's a buzzword, but there's no really any such thing as clean coal. And as I understand it, that in China, there really aren't any pollution controls like you would see here in America or other places of the world. And when you're burning all this coal as an engine, the fuel to this economic engine, we all live on the same planet, and there's no reputable scientific entity that doesn't acknowledge the fact that we're in this climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it. It's a real deal. It's happening. And all of these trains going over there where no pollution controls, we live in the same planet. It's affecting us now. And so I think those would be a couple of things that you might consider when you make this resolution. And, thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Any other members of the public wishing to address council? Jump up here, Larry. Don't be shy. How many times have you had to do this?
I don't know. Anyway, I'm Larry Wagner, 627 20th Street, Washougal. On this coal stuff, I just want to kind of set the record straight as far as emergency services being impacted by increased train traffic. There is no impact on the emergency services because we use the overhead. That's the major drive on that, was to put the overhead over for emergency vehicles to get over to the other side of the tracks. Camas has got an overhead, Vancouver's got overheads around the train tracks. So that's all I wanted to say, was that there's no impact as far as your medical care.
Thanks, Larry. Any other folks that would like to comment to council? Okay, seeing none, I don't believe I have any items for you this evening. Mr. David, do you have any items? Mr. Scott? Okay. And council members? Jennifer?
I'd like to just make a comment regarding E-Verify. It's been brought up a couple of times tonight. I actually sponsored this when it came before council the first time, did a lot of research on it, and I believe when we first set up our program, it was in line with the county and what the county was doing, and so we were, just kind of following along with, the regulations, dollar amounts and such for contractors, what the county was doing. But I understand that might have changed recently. Did they lower their amount? Jim? Sorry, put you on the spot again.
No, that's all right. Yeah, there's various agencies that have lowered their amount. Speaking specifically about the county, I don't have that information. We actually have an interlocal agreement with the city of Vancouver for their small works roster. And actually, that small works roster recently went down to 0. The people that are on there do not have to re-register at this time, but if they do execute a contract, then they do have to re-register, and 0 is the dollar amount now for the Vancouver
Okay, so
small works roster.
if we're sharing contractors that would already be doing business in Vancouver, they're already doing the E-Verify. That's just a standard.
Yes, most of them are.
thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, potentially. With them being on the small works roster, doesn't mean that they're doing any work, doesn't mean that they do any work for us, just means that they qualify to be on that roster to bid for work.
Oh, right.
But doesn't necessarily mean that they get used by anybody.
I see.
But just so council knows, right now, we do have staff is going through and preparing some information for you for your consideration on possibly doing some adjustments to our E-Verify policies.
All right, that's all I have.
Other council members? Joyce?
Tomorrow, the 24th, there's several of us that are going over and have a tour of the Port of Vancouver. There are 3 slots left. Is one council member, if anybody would like to join us. It will be from 2 to 4.
Okay. Any items from other council members? David?
I've heard a lot of concerns tonight, mainly environmental and health, about this coal train business, and I'll be interested to see the documentation. A little bit about China, based on some remarks that were made tonight. I was a foreign area officer for the U.S. Army. My specialty area was Northeast Asia. That's China, Korea, Japan. I have a master's degree in modern Far Eastern history, and I have to question whether, well, I'll just make it as a statement. If we don't sell coal to China, then China will buy the coal somewhere else, they'll burn it, and we'll still get the pollution. If we supply the coal, then we have some control over the quality of coal that we supply. We also have some leverage over them. Although I will tell you that leverage with the Chinese is not something that's easy to use based on their history. The other thing that will happen is that we won't get the economic benefit of selling the coal to China, and frankly, we need that, not only for our balance of payments, but because we're spending more than we're taking in at the federal level and the state level. The last thing, there was something said tonight about global warming has been established by the scientific community. And I would only say that, to the contrary, it's been soundly refuted by the international scientific community. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dave. Any other items from council? Paul?
I'm just going to pretend that I'm Tom Brady and pass.
Okay.
Go Patriots.
Any last items? We are adjourned. We have no meeting next week. We will be here 2 weeks from tonight. We are adjourned.
Is that because there's 5 members?
I'm sorry? Yes, yes.
Okay.
That they should know. We do have 3 more slots if somebody wants to come with us.
Yeah, I'm doing mine on Wednesday.